Chosen ones. There are places on this earth that no map dares to chart. Places where the desert winds carry a hum too low for the unawakened ear. You felt it before you saw it. The faint vibration beneath your feet, as if the ground itself had a pulse, as if it recognized you. The air shimmered in the heat, but it was not the sun's doing. Something ancient, older than empires, was breathing in the sand. You walked toward the ruins that no history book admits exist. Towers of blackened stone rose from the dunes, etched with symbols that seemed to move when you weren't looking. They pulsed with a soft light, as if remembering an oath sworn before the first kingdom fell. Each step you took, the glow deepened, as though the temple itself had been waiting for you. Not for your kind, not for your bloodline, but for you specifically. The Anunnaki carved these halls long before humanity knew its own name. Their altars were not meant for worship, but for alignment, aligning flesh with spirit, earth with stars. And yet, in the silence of this forgotten place, the stones bent toward you like supplicants to a king returned. The hum became a song, but no human tongue could sing it. It was the sound of memory awakening in matter. You reached the first archway, and as your hand brushed the stone, the world shifted. For a moment, the desert vanished. A vision unfurled. Skies alive with twin suns, towering beings with eyes like molten gold walking beside rivers that glowed in the night. And among them, a figure cloaked in light, watching you with a gaze both infinite and familiar. Then, the vision fractured, replaced by the sharp bite of hot wind. You were back in the ruin, yet the glow clung to you, marking you as one who had crossed a threshold. The air was heavier now, as though the temple itself held its breath, waiting for the next step you would take. Somewhere deep inside these ancient walls, a mechanism stirred, a lock older than iron, a code written not in language but in light, and it was answering to you. The sun had long fallen beyond the horizon, yet the air clung to its heat, as if reluctant to release the day. The desert was a sheet of shadow and silver, each dune catching the moonlight in a way that made it look like a frozen ocean. And in the center of that vast stillness, the gate stood. It was not built of stone like the walls surrounding it, but of a metal that refused to rust or tarnish despite the centuries. Its surface rippled faintly, as though it were a skin stretched over something alive. The hum was low, steady, like the breath of a sleeping giant. It resonated in your bones more than in your ears, and with every step you took toward it, the sound grew warmer, richer, until it felt as though it might carry you forward on its own. Symbols carved into the frame glowed faintly in the moonlight, pulsing in time with the rhythm of the hum. They did not feel like decorations. They felt like instructions, a language that your mind almost understood but couldn't quite hold on to. When you drew near, the wind shifted. The air tasted metallic, sharp, and your skin prickled as though the atmosphere itself had grown thinner. The desert behind you seemed to fade, its sounds dimming until there was nothing left but your own breathing and the constant thrum of the gate. The metal's glow deepened, and in that light, you thought you saw shapes moving across its surface, shadows of figures walking in a place beyond, their forms elongated, their steps deliberate. One figure turned its head as if it sensed you watching. For an instant, Its eyes shone like fire reflected in water, and the hum swelled in response. The frame of the gate vibrated under an unseen touch, and a thin beam of light traced itself from the top to the bottom, cutting the air between you and whatever lay beyond. It wasn't just an opening, it was a summons. Your hand twitched toward it before you realized it, drawn not by curiosity, but by the undeniable pull of recognition. The gate was not showing you something new. It was reminding you of something you had once known. Somewhere in the dark beyond the threshold, a voice whispered your name, and the hum shifted into a tone that sounded frighteningly like anticipation. You stepped closer, knowing you had already crossed a line that could not be undone. The gate faded behind you, its hum dissolving into the stillness as you stepped into a corridor carved from black stone that swallowed the light. The air was cooler here, thick with a scent that was neither dust nor decay, but something older, as if time itself had a fragrance. The walls on either side rose higher than the reach of your sight, smooth and seamless except for the faint lines of symbols etched deep into their surface. They caught the dim glow from somewhere unseen, like the faint shimmer of moonlight on water, trapped in darkness. You reached out to trace one of the carvings and felt a vibration beneath your fingertips. It wasn't stone you were touching. It was something alive in its own way, resonating with a pulse that matched your heartbeat. The symbols seemed to rearrange themselves subtly when you looked away, only to return to their original form when you faced them again. It was not a trick of the eye, but a test, as if the wall was waiting for you to see beyond its surface. Then you heard it, a thread of sound, so faint it was almost thought instead of noise. It was music, but not in any melody you recognized. Each tone was a note shaped by breath and weight, the sound of stone speaking. You leaned closer, and the song sharpened into words, though not in your language, and yet you understood. It was a psalm, a hymn not written for gods, but for a single figure who had once walked among both mortal and immortal. The words spoke of one who carried light into the depths, whose voice could calm the storm and wake the dead. A shepherd who left the high places to walk among the low, not to rule them, but to lead them through the shadow. In that moment, you knew the walls were not just telling a story. They were remembering him. The cadence was ancient, but the name, though unspoken, echoed in your chest with the weight of recognition. Your hand remained against the obsidian, feeling its warmth grow. The psalm did not stop. It grew louder, weaving itself around you, filling your mind, until there was nothing else but its call. You realized you were no longer walking alone in this corridor. The air had shifted, and someone or something was now walking beside you, unseen yet undeniably there. The corridor narrowed until it forced you into single steps, each footfall echoing, as though the stone beneath you were hollow. The faint glow that had guided you before dimmed, and the air became heavier, pressing against your chest as if warning you not to continue. You felt it before you saw it, a change in the air, a subtle ripple, as though something vast had shifted just beyond sight. You stopped, listening. The silence was perfect. Too perfect, the kind that swallows breath and swallows thought. And then it happened. A shadow slid across the far wall, smooth and deliberate, moving against the direction of your own light. There was no torch, no sun, nothing to cast it. Yet it stretched long and thin, bending unnaturally around the contours of the stone, as though it were searching for something or someone. You tried to convince yourself it was an illusion, born of exhaustion, but the sound gave it away. A faint scrape, not of feet on the floor, but of something brushing against the very fabric of the air. It moved again, this time faster, flickering from wall to wall, never quite revealing its shape, yet somehow always facing you. You felt its gaze without eyes, a weight like a hand on your shoulder, urging you to move forward rather than turn back. The narrow path opened into a vast chamber, the ceiling lost to darkness. In the center, pools of liquid black reflected the faint light from nowhere, their surfaces perfectly still. The shadow followed, stretching ahead of you now, as if leading rather than chasing. You hesitated, wondering if it was guiding you or delivering you to something else entirely. It stopped at the edge of the largest pool. For a moment it trembled, its form shivering like a flame about to go out. Then it sank into the surface without a ripple, vanishing as though it had never been there. The chamber felt colder in its absence, but the sense of being watched did not leave. It had not gone. It had merely changed where it was watching from. The pool's surface stilled, but the air above it shimmered, as if holding heat from an invisible flame. You stepped closer, and the reflection shifted, not showing your face, but an expanse of stars suspended in a blackness deeper than any night you had known. They were not scattered randomly. They formed a pattern, precise and deliberate, each point of light linked by faint lines of silver that pulsed in rhythm with your heartbeat. You knelt at the edge, studying the constellation. At first it was unfamiliar, an arrangement that belonged to no chart used by sailors or astronomers. But as your eyes adjusted, the shapes began to change. The lines between the stars bent and curved, forming symbols like the ones carved into the obsidian walls. And then you saw it. At the very center of the map, a figure traced by light. Arms outstretched, a single beam descending from above to rest upon its head. The posture was one you had seen before, not in stone or sky, but in stories whispered in sacred places. You remembered the verse, though you could not say where you had first heard it. He shall be as a light in the firmament, guiding those who walk in shadow, for the heavens bear witness to his path. The words seemed to hum within the chamber, aligning with the silent map before you. It was not merely an image of the stars. It was a living scripture, written across the vault of the universe, unchanged for ages. The constellations shifted again, this time revealing a path. A thread of light began at the central figure and wound outward toward the edge of the map, ending at a cluster of stars that pulsed with greater intensity. The message was clear, though no word was spoken. You were being shown where to go, but also what had gone before. The same path had been walked by another long ago, one whose presence still lingered in the light itself. As you reached out toward the reflection, the water shivered without your touch. The map collapsed inward, stars falling into darkness until only the central figure remained, its outstretched arms glowing brighter and brighter. The beam from above lengthened, reaching toward you across the surface. You felt it in your chest like a heartbeat not your own, drawing you forward until you could no longer tell whether it was the map leading you or the verse. The air beyond the star map grew warmer, carrying with it a metallic scent that hinted at something hidden deep within the earth. You followed a narrow passage, the walls narrowing as if the stone itself was pressing in, forcing you to move slowly. Ahead, a faint glimmer flickered, gold against the darkness, and with each step it grew brighter until it seemed to paint the air in its hue. The corridor widened suddenly, opening into a chamber unlike any you had seen before. The walls here were plated in sheets of hammered gold, not dulled by age, but shining as though freshly forged. Every surface reflected the dim light in strange ways, bending it into patterns that moved like liquid across the room. At the far end stood a massive doorway without hinges or handles, its surface engraved with symbols so precise they seemed cut by something beyond human craftsmanship. The glow came from lines in the engraving itself, as though light were bleeding out from the other side. And before you could step closer, a figure emerged from the shadows near the door. Tall, robed in black, that shimmered faintly like the surface of oil on water. The keeper stood with hands clasped before him. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but you could feel his eyes on you, measuring, weighing, deciding whether you belonged here. He did not speak, yet the chamber seemed to tighten around you, as though the air itself awaited his permission. When he finally moved, it was not to block your way, but to circle you, each step silent despite the golden floor beneath. He studied you without looking directly at your face, as if what he sought was not in your features, but in the space around you. His presence was heavy, ancient, the kind that could not be faked or inherited. The keeper had been here long before you were born, and he would remain long after you left. Without a word, he stopped in front of the great golden door and placed his palm against its surface. The engravings flared with sudden brilliance, casting long shadows across the chamber. The symbols shifted, unlocking themselves in a way that felt alive. The keeper stepped aside, leaving the passage open, but his gaze lingered, as if warning you that the chamber beyond would change more than you were ready to accept. You crossed the golden threshold, and the light shifted instantly. It was softer here, almost warm to the touch, wrapping itself around you in a way that felt less like illumination and more like an embrace. The chamber was circular, its walls inlaid with gemstones that caught and scattered the glow into countless fragments, each shard of light dancing across the floor like living things. In the center stood an altar carved from a single piece of white stone, so polished it reflected your form with unsettling clarity. As you stepped closer, the light within the gemstones began to change. The warm gold deepened, tinged with crimson, and the scattered fragments moved with new purpose. They gathered slowly on the floor between you and the altar, forming lines and shapes that grew clearer with every heartbeat. At first you thought it was another symbol, another ancient sigil meant to guide or bind. But when the last shard of light fell into place, you saw it clearly, a cross, radiant and perfect, blazing on the temple floor. It was not like the engravings on the obsidian walls or the patterns in the star map. This was simple, unadorned, yet it seemed to carry the weight of ages. The air thickened, heavy, with a presence you could feel pressing in from all sides, not oppressive, but infinite. The light of the cross pulsed in slow rhythm, and each pulse seemed to echo inside your chest. You remembered the psalm from before, the one hidden in the obsidian. Its words now felt alive in this glow. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The chamber seemed to breathe those words without sound, as though the stone itself had kept them safe for this moment. The cross on the floor brightened, casting its glow upward until it reached the ceiling and spread like a crown of light across the dome. A faint sound stirred in the silence, not from outside, but from within the altar itself. It was a single note, pure and steady, vibrating through the floor and into your bones. The cross's light intensified, almost too bright to look at, and shadows fled to the farthest edges of the room. You felt the pull again, not to move toward it, but to kneel. The light of the cross still lingered in your vision as you left the circular chamber. Its afterimage burned into your mind like a brand you could not shake. The passage beyond curved downward, the air cooling with each step, until you felt as though you were walking beneath the weight of mountains. The walls changed from polished stone to a dark, metallic surface that reflected distorted fragments of your silhouette, as though the path itself wanted to remind you you were not alone. The corridor ended abruptly at a vast, open space. Here, the air seemed thinner, yet charged, as if every particle vibrated with suppressed energy. In the center of the room stood an enormous ring, wider than the tallest palm trees, forged of a material that shifted in color depending on how you looked at it. Black one moment, silver the next, then a hue that didn't seem to belong in this world at all. The surface of the ring was etched with symbols similar to those on the golden door, but these were deeper, sharper, as though they had been cut with fire instead of tools. You stepped closer, and the temperature dropped sharply. The ring did not hum, did not emit any visible light, yet the air within its circle rippled like the surface of disturbed water. A faint shimmer spread from the base upward until the entire interior was filled with a liquid-like sheen. It was neither glass nor water, but something between, something that felt alive in its stillness. You realized with a jolt that you were looking at a passage, not a doorway, but a threshold to somewhere far beyond this place. No sound marked its activation, no blinding flash to announce its opening. It simply was. The silence around it was not empty. It was purposeful. A silence that waited for your choice. For a moment, shapes moved within the shimmer, fleeting glimpses of landscapes bathed in strange light, of skies with unfamiliar constellations, of towering figures whose eyes followed you even through the veil. The pull toward it was undeniable, yet it carried no promise of return. The air at your back felt heavier now, as though even the temple itself leaned forward to see what you would do. You stood at the edge, the surface of the gateway just an arm's length away, aware that crossing it would not simply move you through space, it would move you through something far greater. The Stargate's shimmer faded behind you as you entered a long hall, its ceiling lost in darkness. The air felt different here, thicker, colder, as though it had been waiting untouched for centuries. The floor was lined with pale stone tiles, each marked with a sigil you could not read, yet their arrangement suggested they were part of a larger design that stretched the length of the hall. At the far end stood a massive circular slab set into the wall, its surface engraved with a single seal. The design was intricate yet balanced, with lines that converged at a central point, where a faint silver glow pulsed like the heartbeat of something sleeping. Above the seal was an opening in the ceiling, a perfectly cut shaft that framed the night sky. Through it, the moon hung enormous and low, its surface awash in deep crimson, the lunar eclipse already underway. The silver glow in the seal grew stronger, pulsing in time with the moon's slow movement across the sky. You could feel the energy building, each beat sending a vibration through the floor beneath your feet. As the moon darkened further, the air seemed to hum with a strange harmony, as though multiple voices were speaking in unison without sound. Then you saw it. Fine cracks spreading outward from the seal's center, glowing brighter with each pulse. The stone around it groaned softly, the sound resonating through your chest. You stepped closer, and the temperature dropped sharply, your breath turning to mist in the golden chamber's memory. The cracks widened until they formed a perfect cross of light. For a moment, you thought of the words once spoken about a veil torn from top to bottom, an act that had changed the order of all things. The glow intensified, spilling across the floor and climbing the walls, chasing away every shadow. The seal's center began to spin slowly, not physically moving, but shifting within itself, until the design opened like a flower under moonlight. When the final sliver of moonlight vanished into darkness, the seal gave way entirely. The light poured outward in a single beam, striking the floor at your feet. It didn't fade. It tunneled downward, revealing a spiral stairway carved into the depths below. The air carried the faint scent of rain on stone, impossibly fresh in this place. From somewhere far beneath, a low, resonant sound began to rise, steady and patient, as if something long hidden had finally begun to awaken. The spiral stair descended into darkness so complete it felt alive, wrapping around you with every step. The beam of light from the broken seal followed, illuminating just enough to keep you moving forward. The air grew heavier, saturated with the scent of mineral and dust, but beneath it lingered something unexpected, the faint aroma of burning incense, as if a ritual had only just ended. The stairs ended at a vast chamber where towering statues lined both walls. Each figure was carved from a single block of stone, their forms humanoid yet unnervingly precise, as though they had been shaped by hands that understood anatomy beyond human limits. They stood in perfect rows, facing forward, their eyes lowered as if in perpetual reverence. The beam from above struck the center of the chamber, revealing a polished floor of black stone that mirrored the statues in distorted reflection. You stepped into the chamber, and the silence shifted. A faint vibration moved through the air. Not the hum of the gate, nor the song of the psalm, but something slower, heavier, as though the walls themselves were breathing. Then it happened. One by one, the statues raised their heads in a movement so fluid it defied their stone nature. Their eyes, once dull and lifeless, ignited with a dim golden glow that pulsed in unison with the vibration filling the room. You froze, the weight of their collective gaze settling over you like a mantle. They did not move otherwise. They simply watched. Yet their attention was not passive. It was searching, stripping away the surface of you, looking for something hidden beneath flesh and memory. You felt the urge to speak, to ask what they wanted, but the chamber itself seemed to hold your voice captive. Then, from the far end of the hall, the largest statue stirred. Twice the height of the others, its form radiated a presence that pressed against your skin. Its eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment, its gaze was not on you, but through you, as if it saw both your present and a shadow of your future intertwined. The statue's eyes flickered once in unison, and the golden light in the room deepened to an amber hue. Somewhere beyond the chamber, a sound began to rise. a slow, resonant toll, like a bell buried deep beneath the earth. The statues did not look away, and the vibration in the air grew stronger, as though the next moment would decide whether they remained still or took their first step toward you. The tolling from beneath the earth grew steadier, each resonance pulling at the walls as if the very structure of the temple responded to its call. The statue's gaze remained locked on you, their golden eyes unblinking. Then, slowly, the beam of light from the broken seal above began to dim, not fading into darkness, but condensing, narrowing into a single, concentrated column that shone directly on the center of the chamber floor. You stepped toward it without meaning to, your body moving as though the light itself commanded your limbs. The air thickened, charged with a power that tasted metallic on your tongue. When you reached the beam's center, the floor beneath your feet began to shift, the black stone rippling as though it had turned to liquid. From within the ripples, a shape began to emerge, first a faint outline, then a solid form, until you stood over a disk of pure white crystal, embedded in the floor. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat too slow for the living. The statues shifted subtly, their heads tilting upward toward the ceiling, as though acknowledging something beyond your view. The amber glow in their eyes deepened, casting elongated shadows that stretched and wavered across the walls. The disk beneath you brightened, and a voice, not in sound but in thought, pressed into your mind. It spoke no words, yet you understood. The time between what was and what will be had collapsed, and the threshold was open. In the vision that followed, you saw skies torn by light, rivers reflecting constellations that had not yet been born, and vast shapes descending, figures whose scale dwarfed mountains, their presence shaking the air itself. Yet among them was one whose radiance eclipsed the others, not by size, but by the purity of the light that followed him. His gaze was fixed not on the earth or the heavens, but on you, as though the entire descent hinged on your choice. The vision broke, leaving only the chamber's silence and the statue's unwavering watch. The disk at your feet pulsed once more, brighter than before, sending a wave of light up through the beam into the unseen sky above. Somewhere far beyond the temple, something answered. The air shifted, the tolling stopped, and the golden eyes of the statues flickered. Once, twice, before the entire chamber seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment that would decide whether the gods would indeed return.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.